Hey, this is Jay, and this is a quick tutorial for an image analysis system using Monday.com, ChatGPT, and n8n. So we are going to pull images out of Monday.com, and then we're going to split out all the image files and send them off to GPT to get an analysis of those files and get some text data out of it, and then we're just going to add it back into Monday.com for now. So in this case, we are analyzing some receipts. So we're going to try to pull some data out of some receipts, and then just use that image data. So we're going to use GPT to pull that receipt data out and then add it back to Monday.com. So I've got an example board here. And so really the main things we're concerned about in this case is just on this particular item, I have 2 image receipts. So we're going to be grabbing those publicly and sending them to GPT so that we can just get all the data into a long text. So this is kind of just an example. Obviously, it's not the most straightforward use case, but it'll depend on whatever you're trying to do with the data. But it kind of gives you an idea of how to pull that data out and then what to do with it next. So in this case, you could easily trigger this with a status. I'm actually using a photos ready just so I don't think you want to look for changes on this, because if you're still in the process of uploading images, you don't want that to kick off immediately. But you also could easily just make this a status. It's like image is ready to go, whatever, analyze, ready to analyze. But once that's ready to go, I'm doing a manual trigger, but you could also do a webhook. I actually have another video talking about how to do webhooks in Monday.com. So you could set that up so that when you do change the status or you do check that box that photos are ready, then you can kick off the system that way instead. But in this case, since I'm doing more of a manual setup, I am doing a get many. So I'm just connecting to that board. So I'm connecting to the invoice board that I showed, and I'm connecting to the invoiced group. So it's just grabbing all the items from this invoice group. And then we are going to drill down into the data that we need to be able to set up this system to be able to pull those images. So the first thing I'm doing right now is I am filtering. And actually, let me go ahead and restart this so we can walk through a little bit more directly. So I'm first getting all the data. So first I'm grabbing all those items, like I said, and then obviously we don't need all of the items. So what I'm going to do is filter. So in this case, I am filtering on the photos ready column, and that's all that's happening here. So I ended up sorting through all these columns. So I know it's the 10th one down, and I ended up dragging that check value. So I'm dragging the value into there. And so that value is currently false for the first item. So that obviously would not match. So I'm just doing it contains checked true. So we're just looking for the first one that's checked. And again, if you're doing this based off of like a webhook, you could do a webhook based on when you click this checkbox or change your status, you can kind of skip past this entire workflow section. But in this case, I'm just looking for the specific item that I want to use. Now, this is where the real work happens. So we have to, unfortunately, drill into the Monday.com data to be able to get to the files that we want. So that's what's happening here. So I know in this case that I want to get to the files column. So we're going to skip past these other columns. And so I know that my images are attached under a files column. Unfortunately, the name doesn't match, but the title of that column I have is images. And so this is the data that we want. So I'm actually pulling out this data value right here. That's what's happening there. So when I do that, we're going to pull out that data. And that data is actually, it's a JSON object, but it's still in a text format. So I've got the data that I want. So we've got the JSON that contains all of the image data, but I'm going to go ahead and manually map this. And so all it's going to do is put the text data of the JSON into an actual JSON object. And that's what n8n tends to prefer to work with, which then, now that we've got this split out, that gives you the drag and drop ability to be able to get to these values directly. So that's all this is doing. This is just a JSON edit node to be able to manually map that JSON value into all of its components. So now if you notice, still we have a files array. So we have files, and this collapses up, and then we have 2 different files objects, right? So now we want to split these out even further. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to split out from that level. So unfortunately, like the data that we're using right now is still under the values object, then the files. So all we're doing is dragging files into here. And then that's going to let us split these out into separate items. So if I go ahead and execute that, you can see we end up with 2 items. And this is just the one of the individual images, right? So we've broken it up into just this data, because that's what we want to do, is we want to iterate through each one of those images. And really all we need is the asset ID. Like that's the thing we're trying to get to. So we had to drill down to that based on Monday.com's data format, but we've now reached that. So now we can iterate through each of the images. just with the loop item. So that's all you have to do, loop over items. Now, once we're inside of that, we do have to call Monday.com's API, because now, unfortunately, you can't just grab they don't provide you with the public URL that you can use to actually access that image that we could then send to GPT. So unfortunately, all the data that we've grabbed here before, none of this actually had the URL that we could use. So even when I was back here, when I was doing the split out, we had all the data. They have URLs in here, but the URLs for the image that that they provide are not usable with GPT. So they have a URL here to say this is how you get to that resource, but it's a protected resource. So that means you have to actually be logged into Monday.com to be able to get to this image URL. So this URL will not work if you're trying to send it to GPT. So unfortunately, that's why we have to drill in to get that data. And then we have to use this Monday.com API to then get the public URL for that image, not the protected one. So this API is pretty straightforward. I will include all of the JSON to be able to do this in the description as well as in the workflow. But we're just calling a post request. So we're doing an HTTP request node, doing a post method to api.monday.com/v2. We do have predefined credentials, so hopefully you're already connected to monday.com. So you can just use your existing monday.com credentials. So that's what predefined credentials will be. You would use your monday.com API. So you just search for monday.com when you're in this list. And then you'd use your hopefully existing monday.com API account. So that's it for the credentials. Like, you're able to use your existing connection to monday.com. And then the body, we are sending in a JSON body. And I mean, it's pretty straightforward. There's only like the one value here. Like I said, we just need the asset ID. So we just need the asset ID of the image that we're trying to access. That's the only part that changes here. But unfortunately, it's doing a GraphQL post body. So unfortunately, like, this is how you're going to actually have to access this. But hopefully this is just more of a copy paste kind of situation. So if I go ahead and execute previous nodes, all I've done is drag asset ID into this section right here. So it just looks like that. So hopefully easy enough to execute that API, but it does give us finally what we've been looking for, the public URL for that image. So this is actually the URL that we can use to get the image and then send it off to GPT. Again, because the protected static here will not work if we try to send that to GPT. GPT will not have access to our monday.com account. So now that we finally have the actual API or the actual URL for the image, we can send that to GPT. So I went ahead and had GPT generate this request. So it's a little bit verbose. You probably want to tweak it to be a little bit more specific to your situation. But we're just doing an OpenAI analyze image node. So in this case, you hopefully already have your OpenAI account connected. And we are looking to do the resource of image rather than text, because we are sending an image into GPT for analysis. And so the goal is to analyze the image. So we wanted to be able to just read over the image and tell us what's in it. So unfortunately, like, the list here is only for GPT 4.0. They haven't updated this. GPT 5 would probably be better, but they don't have that available in n8n to be able to select yet, at least for the image analysis. You could also do an HTTP request node and call the API directly if you wanted to use GPT 5 instead. I could probably do something about that later, but for now, GPT 4.0 should be fine. The image analysis is actually pretty solid. The only thing is that you may still get some flakiness with a JSON response versus a Markdown response, but we'll get to that. So I will provide the prompt I have here, just UR precise receipt, OCR, and parser. So OCR being optical character recognition. And all we're going to do is read the attached receipt images, extract structured data for accounting, and be as conservative as you can. Make sure to just leave fields blank or null if you are seeing any issues, and then always return valid JSON. We try to really harp on, but doesn't always do it. But it should be pretty close. And then they give GPT came up with like a pretty robust JSON object example. So it's pulling out a lot of data. So again, it's probably going to depend on what your goal is and what your receipts look like and that kind of thing. You're probably better off taking one of your receipts, putting it into GPT yourself initially, and asking it for a similar prompt, but more specific to the receipts or whatever documents you're working with directly. But this prompt hopefully will get us a pretty solid JSON object based on the receipt image that we send in. And then it does include a couple extra rules. I try to normalize the dates, make sure numbers are plain. And then, if you're getting into multiple receipts and that kind of thing, I probably wouldn't do that. I would probably like iterate over them instead of trying to handle it all in one go. So again, this prompt is a little verbose. I would probably modify it to be a little bit more specific to your use case. But it's a good start. and as always, do not use Markdown. So again, what I was talking about before, the goal is to send it an image. So we can actually send it an image URL. So you can say image input is image URL. You could also download the binary, I guess, if you needed to. But since we have the URL, we can just send it the URL, and that's an option. So all I've done here is just drag the public URL in, and then that should be good to go. So now GPT can actually get to the public version of the image, and it can do a quick analysis and come back with this JSON object that we tried to tell it to do. JSON object is a little, again, verbose. There's a lot of data in this one, but again, it just depends on like what's on your receipt. So depending on your situation, it may be a little bit different. So there we go. But it's given us a nice beginning. So let's see. I think this was number 2. This is actually the first image on there. So General City Center. If we go back into here, this is this receipt, I believe. So yeah, it looks like it identified that correctly. General City Center, 123 Market Street, Anytown, USA. And GPT actually generated this image as well. So that's the example I gave. But yeah, looks like I was able to grab that and the phone number. Then yeah, it is. So the only thing here is that like this prompt is a little bit verbose. So it's going to fill in a lot of nulls. So it's probably a little too big. But anyway, it gets the job done. So now we can pull text out of the receipt, and then you may have to tweak a little bit to get the result that you're looking for. It may take a few attempts, but the system will hopefully do that automatically now. So the last step here is that I'm just making sure that I'm adding all the content back into one object. So I'm just making sure that it grabs the content object and mapping it to a JSON object just in case. This is probably kind of optional, but since we're looping through everything, I just want to make sure that it structures it correctly. Because the last step here is that when the loop here is done, we're going to do an aggregate. So I'm just going to look for all of those content objects, and we're going to put all of it into one big object again, because ultimately all I'm doing is writing the entire result back into Monday.com, and I'm just going to dump it in as text like this to just be able to use further. I was actually going to use this for another PDF, but depending on what you want to do, you could actually, go and generate more Monday.com items or dump all the information into a spreadsheet instead. So it's kind of up to you to where you want to take the data next. But this at least will help you find all of the images in Monday.com, use GPT to extract the data from the image or document, and then be able to send that data off to where you want in text form. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and run this real quick so we can see the whole flow happen. And so go ahead and execute. And again, if you're triggering this off of, you could trigger it off of like a webhook. Say when you click photos ready, like you've already got your images uploaded, click photos ready, then you could jump to this part where you're just splitting out the data. But really, it's just a couple steps here to be able to drill down into the Monday.com data structure, mostly so that we can be able to call this API and grab the ID of those items to be able to get to the public URL of the image so we can send it off to GPT. So it looks like it has completed. So hopefully we will have, we have some JSON data in here about the documents that we were scanning. So basically the text version of these documents now exists in this long text column. So that is pretty much it for this workflow. So hopefully that's helpful. Again, kind of just a way to be able to not so directly scan the images that you're adding to Monday.com and pull the text data out of those images. So hopefully it's helpful. Definitely let me know if you run into any issues, you have any questions about that. Good luck with whatever you end up doing next with all of your now image to text data. But thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. And I will see you in the next one.